Let's take a look at teeth. You'll notice on the screen I've got some teeth here, along with some lips and some gums. What color are teeth? Are they white? Yeah, kind of like an off-white, like a bone, ivory, I don't know what you want to call it, but they're not white, and they're also not gray. I see where some people would say, we'll take all the saturation out of it. I also see where some people say, well, they're kind of yellow in the photo here. If I want to get rid of yellow, the opposite of yellow is blue. I could go into my blue channel and add some blue. And in theory, yes, you could ease some of the yellow out. The problem with trying to do something very absolute like that, like let's take yellows and push it towards blues, is it's not always the same shade of yellow. Like it's a little bit orangier around up in here. Really, it is kind of more of a saturation issue. If you pull some of the saturation down, pull it closer to gray. I mean, teeth aren't gray. They've got that kind of like off-white sort of color to it. But if you kind of use the saturation, like a hue and saturation, and pull some of the saturation down, they often look quite a bit better. You don't want to pull it all the way down to zero. You don't want to make them completely gray. But let's just take a look at using that hue and saturation to pull some of this yellow out of the teeth there. I'm just going to throw on a hue and saturation adjustment layer. And I'm going to take this saturation, like I said, you don't want to make the teeth completely gray, so you wouldn't want to pull it all the way down to -100, but I'm going to pull it all the way down to -100 because that'll make it really easy to see where you're doing the masking on the image. So I'm going to pull that saturation all the way down, and ultimately I want to fill this layer mask with black. What's a fast way to fill that layer mask with black? Command I will invert the layer mask. And then I can grab a paintbrush, and with some white paint, I can just bring back that desaturating effect. What do you think? I think we're there. Or should we be a little bit more precise? Remember that girl with the red flower around her neck? We turned into a blue flower, and we're like, hey, there's no hard edges in Photoshop. There's always a little bit of softness, always a transition. And if you use a brush that doesn't match, like let's say I chose a brush like this, I'm like, okay, I'm going to start bringing back that desaturating effect, and when I get to the edge, if I don't go all the way to the edge, I'll leave a little bit of a yellow fringe here. If I do get all the way to the edge, it's going to bleed out into the lips and gums, and gray lips and gums looks kind of gross. But if I choose a smaller brush, something where the softness of the brush kind of matches up with the softness of the edge of whatever I'm cutting out. In this case, I'm what, 7 pixels around there. We can kind of work our way around the outside of those teeth. Make sure you don't get onto the gums. Like I said, gray gums, gray lips looks kind of gross, but just kind of work your way around the outside. And don't worry about trying to fill in the center. I mean, this is probably small enough that we could kind of fill in the center by hand, but I just want to quickly review that technique where we were able to really quickly fill in that center part. So call up a hue and saturation adjustment layer. Grab that saturation slider, heft it all the way down to nothing, invert it, and with a paintbrush of an appropriate size, start working your way around the outside of those teeth. The nice thing about using the layer mask for this is if you do go too far, like I accidentally got onto the gums there, just hit X on the keyboard. Oh, actually, before you start painting on that layer mask, make sure you hit D on the keyboard just to make sure that you have pure black and pure white as your foreground and background colors. And a quick 0 on the keyboard will make sure you're at 100% opacity, and then you can hit X to go back and forth between black and white. So if you mess up a little bit, just hit X, paint out your mistake, hit X again, and you're back to coloring, back to hiding. So once you've gotten all the way around, hold down the Option key, click on the layer mask. That'll make the layer mask visible. And anybody remember the steps for filling that inner part with white? I'm going to select all this stuff. Like ultimately, all of this black here needs to get selected. I'm just going to grab my magic wand tool. If you go to where the quick select tool is, click and hold, you'll get a little fly out, and we can grab that magic wand tool. Click in there, and what would happen if I filled with white right now? Watch this. Edit, fill. For contents, choose white. Uh-oh, we've got that little fringe around the outside, which leaves that little yellow line around the outside of the teeth. Anybody remember what to do to get rid of that fringe? Expand. We've got a selection, and right now it's on the inside here. The way the magic wand tool works, when you click on a color, like when I click on the black here, boink, it tells it to select black, and anything within a certain tolerance. The default is, I think, 32. I'm at 31 here, so it selected black, and anything within 31 levels from that 0 to 255 grayscale range. So if I clicked, on a mid-tone, it would grab anything within 31 levels. I clicked on black, so it's grabbing black, 0, and anything up to 31, which is kind of a darkish gray. And if you zoom in, sure enough, it's getting everything from 0 up to about 31. All the lighter pixels aren't included in the selection. So when I filled with white, we had the problem of this little fringe around here. But if I were to take this selection and modify it in some way, ideally by expanding it, and how far? A little bit of trial and error. Let's say you were cutting out something that was like a really soft, out of focus, soft edge, and you're using a 30 pixel brush. You'd probably have to expand it about 15 pixels or so. I'm going to swing a guess at 3, and that worked out pretty good. I wouldn't want to take this any further than that. Notice when it jumped out, it got really close to shaving off some of these grayish pixels on the outside. That is the softness that I need to match up with the edge of the teeth there. So you don't want to lose that softness in there. So if it goes too far, you can always Command Z, that'll undo it. Go back under Select, Modify, Expand, and you can put in a different value. But in my case, it looks like 3 worked pretty good, and I can then Edit, Fill, and for contents, choose white. And whenever you're done with the selection, Command D gets rid of the marching ants. And always take a look around and see if anything got missed. Like you can see here, sometimes in little V-notch areas, that expansion wasn't enough to get rid of those areas. Not a problem, just hit B on the keyboard, get that paintbrush, and you can paint those out. And once you Option click on the layer mask again, you'll see those beautifully desaturated, gray, gross looking teeth. But not a problem, it was an adjustment layer. So if we double click on it, we can grab that saturation and we can ease it back. I often find around like, minus 30, minus 40 looks pretty good. And if you want to see a preview, turn that eyeball off and on. There's a before and there's after. Now what about the brightness of the teeth? If I wanted to make these a little bit brighter, what could I do to make them a little bit lighter? There's a slider there called Lightness. Could I use that? Oh, you feel like it's a trick, don't you? No, you can't use it because it's evil. Let's talk about that Lightness slider for a second. Okay, if it's just a little bit, like a few points, it will, yeah. But look at what's happening to the shadows, like these dark bits around here. The way this Lightness slider works, it's not like levels or curves. Let me just quickly compare the two. If I wanted to brighten up this image overall, let's say I threw on a levels adjustment layer. And, oh, actually, this will be a good lesson about the stacking order of the layers. Notice here's my retouching layer, and here's a levels adjustment layer. If I use this to make the image overall brighter, oh, what happened to her skin? Ideally, keep your adjustment layers above your retouching layers. There we go. Now you can do whatever you need to it. But if I just wanted to bring up those, well, actually, I was talking about how the lightness slider is evil. Make it brighter, cool. The highlights stay nice and bright. The shadows stay nice and dark, but everything gets overall brighter. If I make it darker, the shadows stay dark, the highlights stay white, cool. But if I use the lightness slider on hue and saturation, you'll notice it's called hue and saturation, not hue, saturation, and lightness, because the lightness slider is evil. If I try to make it lighter using the lightness slider, it's like there's like fog rolling in or something. It's almost like a white layer put over top at a lower opacity. And it's the same kind of deal if you try to darken. It's like a black layer at a lower opacity. See how the whites go grayish, and see how the blacks go whitish. It's not a great way of trying to lighten and darken things. So if we wanted to lighten up those teeth, I would probably make a levels adjustment layer. So I just throw on a little levels adjustment layer. And same sort of deal, just grab the middle slider, just like we did on the hue and saturation. We pulled it all the way down and then we used the layer mask. I'm going to pull this around until the teeth look lighter, except it is affecting the entire image. Do I have to go through all that masking again? We made this layer mask on the hue and saturation. Do I have to do that all over again on this levels here? I'm actually going to reuse the layer mask from hue and saturation. Just like the 3 R's, reduce, reuse, and recycle. Reusing, that's like better than recycling. So I'm going to reuse this layer mask by holding down the Option and Command, and when I click on the hue and saturation layer, notice I've got 2 little arrows, a black and a white arrow, suggesting that it's going to duplicate it. The Option key is making the duplicate. When I drag it onto the layer mask for the levels and I let go, it asks, do you want to replace the layer mask? And I say, yes. Yes, I do. So I'm able to take that same layer mask from the hue and saturation and put it onto the levels. And the nice thing about this, guys, is because it's its own separate layer mask, its own separate layer, I can double click, I can grab that brightness slider and I can make them lighter, or if I needed to, I could make them darker. I think I'm going to leave it there. Take a look at the brightness of those back teeth. Do you see how bright they are? To my mind, that's a little bit over-brightened. The front teeth look fine. I like the brightness of that, but I want to ease it off the background here. I'm going to take a look at this layer mask. Oh, look at that. It's revealing the brightening effect on the front and on the back. But what if I took a paintbrush, a great big brush, soft brush, and some black paint? And remember, with a brush, it's full intensity in the center and it fades out to nothing on the outside. It's almost like a gradient. If I were to click here, boink, I could remove it from the inner part while leaving it on the front part. Now, I'd probably bring the opacity down a little bit, maybe 50% or so. And I don't have to be looking at the layer mask. I can do it while I'm looking at the image. There we go. It eases some of that brightening off the back teeth. Same deal over here. It seems a little bit too bright on those back teeth. I'll just ease it off. So the front teeth still get lightened. The back teeth, not as much.